Greg Coleridge, I'm the outreach director for the Move to Amend Coalition to promote a constitutional amendment that would not just overturn Citizens United, but deal with these predated, also constitutional doctrines that have equated money as free speech and corporations as persons with inalienable constitutional rights in a variety of different ways. You name it, the corporatization or privatization affects so many issues across the board from coast to coast, impacting people of all political persuasions. All of these decisions regarding money as speech and who defines the relationship between people and corporations used to be sort of a legislative decision made between legislators who gave only privileges, not rights, to corporations when they issued a charter. That was a democratic instrument. All of that has been hijacked or usurped or, dare I say, trumped, preempted by the ability of corporations and money to go to court and say, no, these are not legislative decisions where people and those we elect decide. These are judicial decisions. And once you shift decision-making from sort of the legislative arena to the judicial arena, it's beyond the reach of we the people. And that's why things have gotten so much worse, and seemingly there's been this increasing disconnect between what people want on issue after issue and the kind of policies we have or don't have, because precisely and exactly it's because people are beholden, who we elect, increasingly to the corporate crowd and well-to-do, or it's even beyond the reach of the legislative people we elect because those decisions have come from activist courts. So even if you elect Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Dorothy Day in Congress, there's only so much they can do to bring change in the legislative or regulatory arena if you ignore the constitutional arena. You've got to address, in part, the constitutional arena. And that's what we're trying to do by calling for a 28th constitutional amendment called the We the People Amendment. There's just this growing realization that what's happening is not working, that there's an ever greater chasm between what's needed and what's happening or not happening. You can only metaphorically kick the can down the road so long before people say, basta, enough. Nibbling around the edges and putting Band-Aids on, and yeah, we need to continue to respond and react and resist to the latest individual onslaught coming down the pike, which seems never-ending, but they're never-ending. And will always be, guess what? Responding, resisting, and reacting forever and ever and ever, unless we at least spend some time not just trying to, help people who are coming out of homes that are on fire, but asking, who are the arsonists? Who are the arsonists causing the fire to begin with? Look at family farmers, particularly in places like the Midwest. It's the agribusinesses that are dominating, defining, and authorizing what goes on, not them. And so they're at an economic disadvantage and just being devoured, as small businesses are everywhere. And it's the small businesses that aren't the ones that are buying, renting, leasing, and retaining public officials. It's the big guys. What it is we're calling for in this amendment, We the People Amendment, is basically two components. That only human beings are human beings. Natural persons are natural persons. Corporations are artificial persons created by the state. It would simply go back to what one time once was. The second part of this, We the People Amendment, calls for money no longer being defined, political money, as free speech, to be donated or invested in elections like a tsunami amount, which is what's gone on. Let's have a democratic discussion in our Congresses, in our state legislatures, in our city halls about what should be the appropriate amount of money on various races, how much of it should be private, how much of it should be public. We're not calling for any one of these exact prescriptions. We're just saying, again, sort of conservatively, that the decisions like that should go back into the legislative arena where those discussions and debates can happen. And we think the enactment of these ground rules will level the political playing field, if you will, and create a much more robust and authentic, trustworthy system that people will feel like, okay, we can now feel that government does, in fact, much more represent us. Now let's deal with some of these issues around justice, peace, lack of sustainability that is way overdue from being addressed, that have been ignored. Historically, over the last century, that the threat of a constitutional convention has been enough to move Congress quicker on some things that were enacted that maybe they weren't already inclined to support. So many people think that what's going on today is inevitable, is irreversible, it's kind of how it was meant to be. We really can't do a whole lot about it. That's nonsense. What has gone on in both of these arenas, money being defined as speech, corporations gaining all of these rights, not just political free speech rights, but other sorts of preemptions of other parts of the Constitution. Many people think this is inevitable or irreversible. No. These have happened because of deliberate and intentional decision making by certain people. What has been consciously and deliberately done, we think can consciously and deliberately be undone. There is no inevitability in what's going on today continuing. There isn't. And so it's important to understand that we think we are on the right side of what is truly inevitable, and that our proposal calls for what we believe is the whole enchilada approach, not just changing a little bit of it, because generationally, if you look at the history of this country, there's really you only get kind of one chance in a generation to have a constitutional amendment. Shouldn't it be worthwhile? We think it should be, and that's why we're calling for an end of all never intended constitutional rights, all of these, not just related to money and politics.